I'm here to share a little bit of a different perspective than some of the other speakers have shared today. We've heard a lot about innovation across academia and industry, and since the theme is intelligent health, I'm going to share a little bit about what that has meant in my own life and in my own innovation practice. Some reflections about how we as a community can build ecosystems and structures that foster innovation in the health realm. So this is what a day at the office looks like for me. I'm a practicing neurosurgeon. I treat disorders of the brain and spine, including degenerative disease, tumors, neurotrauma, and other conditions. It's a wonderful profession, an opportunity to help people using the most advanced technology known to humankind. And it's also a remarkable laboratory for innovation, as I'll share a little bit later. This is a field where many new medical advances are pioneered for the first time simply because the need is so great, and a field where the margin of error is incredibly small. In what I do, 1 millimeter to the left or to the right, superior or inferior, can mean the difference between a successful outcome and a catastrophe. And for that reason, we're very attuned to the innovation process, not just the outcomes of research, not just the devices that come to the market and the drugs that come to the market, but the process that gets us there. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. In addition to my work as a neurosurgeon, I've been very fortunate to join and participate in the startup world. And I became interested in this many years ago, and fortunately through the many years I spent here in Atlanta, around the Georgia Tech campus, I've become more and more involved in working with startup companies in the health technology space. I'm an advisor, mentor, board member, or investor in over 24 health technology startups. And it's really a very important part of what I view as my mission in the world. Most of the time, it's really exciting. And I just get so giddy about this and excited, I want to just get up and dance because innovation is so cool. But sometimes you need to, you get frustrated, so you need to kind of meditate. And there are plenty of times when the only thing to do is just pray. And so I've learned this. This is my scheme for dealing with startup companies in the health space. This word innovation has always been an interesting one to me. It's so common. It's sort of the mantra of our age. Whether you're on the left or the right of the political spectrum, pretty much everybody agrees that innovation is a good thing. I've never heard anybody argue against innovation convincingly. But what is this innovation? What is it that we're really talking about when we say innovation or use this concept? People have questioned whether we actually have in our culture an innovation fetish. I mean, are we sort of upholding this term to be more than it actually is? And I thought it was funny, this has infiltrated the medical realm as well. I was on my way to speak at a surgical conference and entering the elevator to go up to the room where they give the talks, and it says, innovation is happening right now upstairs. I'm like, oh my, I better not be late. I got very nervous. I was going to be late for the innovation, but it all got taken care of. We think of this as being a ubiquitous theme in our society, kind of pervading everything, but in actuality, the data shows something different. So you can look at Google Trends on searches for the term innovation, and it actually follows a remarkably consistent pattern. It almost looks like an electrocardiogram. It's so consistent. And you see these troughs in the plot. That's where the volume of searches is low. And every year, it corresponds to the exact same week in the calendar, roughly December 25th to December 31st. It's the holiday week. And so that goes just to show that people are not dealing with innovation in a sort of randomized context. They're dealing with it in corporate America. They're dealing with it in the context of business. And so that's very, it may seem obvious, but it's very important to note that. By the way, the peak of this search volume, does anyone know what month that might be? It's actually around the time of April. So I would say that the organizers of IPaT are pretty wise, and they've done their homework. Today we're talking about intelligent health. And in reflecting on what it means to have an intelligent health innovation ecosystem, we have to think about what we mean by that. And so I think this is an incredible time to be alive, because never before have we had so many opportunities for advancement and so many drivers of change in healthcare. These are all driven, in my opinion, by the number one factor, which is health is now becoming a data science like everything else in the world. Shopping, transportation, banking, these have all become data science disciplines, and health is no different now. The rest of these things follow. Patients are connected continuously to the health system more and more, particularly with mobile and wearable devices. Patients are seen as consumers now. There are demographic changes going on in our society that have a massive impact on healthcare. Managed care and cost pressures continue to be a factor, particularly in the United States, for new technologies. And I think most importantly and most excitingly, certainly for myself and this group, we have advances on the scientific side, molecular and cell biology, the convergence of human and machine intelligence that makes available technologies and procedures that we could have never dreamed of in previous eras. So the future is very bright, but there are certainly pitfalls to be aware of and factors that are outside the control of practicing physicians and health innovators. The population is aging, and with an aging population, particularly as the baby boomers in this country reach the elderly population, hospitalizations increase in a linear, or actually more than linear fashion with age, but the length of those hospitalizations increases at an exponential rate. And what this means in practical terms is that all the healthcare costs are concentrated in the final years of life. And this trend is only going to accelerate in the coming years. We have to be very, very aware of this. The supply of physicians concomitantly is dwindling relative to the need. And so although the supply of physicians is increasing, experts in graduate medical education predict there will be a significant shortage of medical providers in the years to come, and that's going to increase with time. Now, any economist will tell you when you have a workforce shortage, there's one of two things you can do. You can suddenly, out of nowhere, develop more highly trained experts, very difficult to do, or you can increase the productivity of those experts by adjunctive technologies. And here, of course, we all think about artificial intelligence and machine intelligence as coming into the medical realm and helping every doctor take care of more patients simultaneously, helping the system take care of more people better with fewer resources. That's the goal. Intelligent health, I believe, had its origin in 2001, kind of the modern era. This is the Institute of Medicine report called Crossing the Quality Chasm. And it's a very important report. I won't go into the details here, but it was really the first time that we had a public discussion, at least in the United States, about the quality of healthcare, how to improve quality on a systems basis, how to prevent medical errors, and putting processes in place to do that, and thinking deeply about it. And there were a series of recommendations in that report. Most of them, almost 20 years later now, we've made a lot of progress on, but we still have room to go. Suffice it to say that I believe right now is an unprecedented opportunity for all of us when it comes to the future of healthcare and innovation. We've heard today, about a dozen different ideas that could completely revolutionize how medicine is practiced. And there are many more out there on this campus alone. I'm faculty at a summit every year that my friend Dr. Daniel Kraft produces called Exponential Medicine. And it's amazing if you go there. This is one of the graphics that's produced at that summit. You get to discuss what medicine is going to look like not only 1 to 5 years in the future, but 10, 20, 50 years in the future. And it's absolutely mind-boggling. When you have that kind of conversation, you talk about convergent technologies, you talk about cell and restorative therapies, you talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, augmented reality, virtual reality coming into the medical sphere, helping people get cured of conditions that previously could not be treated. You really become an optimist. You can't help but be an optimist despite all the pitfalls. But it raises the question, how do we make this future come about? How do we build the right environment here, right now, today, on this campus and others like it, for high-impact health innovation? Well, it turns out there's a science behind this. It's a relatively new science. In the 1990s was really the first time that the community of management articulated sort of robust models for innovation. This is one of my former professors, Clay Christensen at the Harvard Business School, wrote a book in 1997 advocating this idea of disruptive innovation, which is now a ubiquitous buzzword. But what disruptive innovation means is the idea that an early stage, nimble company can enter the market and beat an incumbent at their own game by producing a technology that may initially be cheaper or inferior, but ultimately becomes better with time. It's a very powerful concept that's been shown to be true again and again, including in the world of health. More recently, in the 2000s and this decade, you've had a series of frameworks come about, such as the lean startup method and others, that have taught early stage companies and founders how to methodically go through the process of generating innovation and achieving success. Those have been codified in startup accelerators, like one of the ones I'm involved in, and several here on the Georgia Tech campus, like Flashpoint, Venture Lab, and others. So we actually have a very rich theoretical background now for achieving innovation and knowing how to accomplish innovation. This has been reflected in the university setting, programs like Stanford Biodesign, which talk about starting with a clinical observation, going to a clinical need, and then applying engineers to create a clinical solution, rather than the inverse of that, which is how it sometimes is done. And it's been applied here at Georgia Tech with the BME Biomedical Engineering Capstone program. There are really 4 pillars to this program, as many of you know: empathy, discovery, epiphany, and assembly. And I've been fortunate to be a mentor in that program. I've seen just the incredible process that students go through in creating groundbreaking discoveries and devices from just an idea. It's really, really extraordinary to watch. But all is not sweetness and light. One of the most feared risks of creating an innovation ecosystem, particularly around an academic setting, spinning out companies from university settings, is the valley of death. And the valley of death is this very feared thing where companies or projects start out in the research laboratory, they're well funded by basic science grants, but as they move through the process towards the market, there's a gap. There's a gap in funding, there's a gap in resources, expertise, knowledge, and community around how to turn research into early stage prototypes and early stage products before they're really ready for the market. When you get to the market, there's plenty of resources. You have venture, you have large industry players, you have revenue itself. But this gap, this valley of death, has witnessed, or actually been witness to, many, many translational failures. In my field of neuroscience and neurotechnology, it's been estimated that there's a 95% failure rate for translating technologies from the research lab to the marketplace. We can do better than that. And I think programs like this one and others around academic centers that connect different types of people around ideas and around communities for innovation can help bridge this gap. And we'll discuss that a bit later. Pasteur's quadrant is something else on the mind of every person who should be looking at university-based innovations, and government agencies. What you want to support is research that is basic research and seeks fundamental understanding, but is inspired by real-world utility. And that's a very, very difficult wire to walk on. It's said that Louis Pasteur was the best example of this, and so he's a model to uphold. But this is something that should be on the minds of any innovation ecosystem participants. We see the transformation in all sectors of society, from governments and nation states to universities and companies, from a world where economy is industrial, based on manufacturing, based on mining resources, to an economy of knowledge. And what's important about this is that the shift is occurring across multiple levels of understanding. So we can understand this shift on the level of institutions like Georgia Tech, or Carnegie Mellon, or MIT, of cities like the city of Atlanta or San Francisco, metro municipal programs, nations like the United States or the United Arab Emirates, or even individual disciplines, for instance, neuroscience or transportation, health. All of these levels have parallels with one another, all these levels of explanation, and I think the same principles can be used across all of them. There's an old model for innovation that worked very well in the early to mid 20th century. This is, anyone know this photo? This is Bell Labs, okay? Bell Labs, where the transistor was invented. Incredible, incredible place, great productivity. But it was a very, as you can see, hierarchical, monolithic model of innovation. That was an era when big companies or big institutions could control everything about the process you need to go from basic research to the marketplace internally. All the experts, all the technologies, all the resources. And that's really not how the world is anymore. This model has all but disappeared. There's another myth out there about innovation ecosystems, that they're dependent on great men and women, these heroic figures. There's a tendency, I think, from all of us to believe in heroes, because we all admire heroes. Some of us want to be heroes. It's natural. It's part of the human condition. Joseph Campbell wrote about the hero with 1,000 faces. Steve Jobs in our culture right now is one of those people. Elon Musk may be another. And these incredibly talented individuals are certainly that. They have contributed in incredible ways to society. The guy on the right is, anyone know? Harvey Cushing. He'd be instantly recognizable to a room full of neurosurgeons, because this is the Steve Jobs of neurosurgery. He was the legendary, heroic figure that created our field single-handedly, or so the legend goes. But in reality, for both these individuals and in our society at large, innovation is a team sport. And most of the technologies that come to the marketplace from basic science out of universities are not touched by the magic hands of a hero. They're created by a system. We'll talk about what that system means. There's a concept called the Innovation Reef. This is generated by Professor Art Markman, who talked about coral reefs. Coral reefs, deep within the ocean, provide a structure for fish to obtain shelter, food, and the symbiotic interactions with other species. Coral reefs themselves are a living organism, of course. And so it's a symbiotic ecosystem. That's where the word ecosystem comes into play. And if you make the analogy to a academic, industrial, government partnership, you think about the different people in that ecosystem. You think about the buildings providing the structure that are the coral reef. You think about engineers, scientists, physicians, venture capitalists, regulatory experts, policymakers, all coming together around this reef. And you could even argue that we're in one right now. Tech Square, Atlanta, is an example of an innovation reef. And this, I think, is the model for the 21st century. This is how we have to think about innovation. Not the great person theory. This, the innovation reef theory. Georgia Tech has caught on to this, okay? So we're here on the Georgia Tech campus today. Right on the website, innovation ecosystem, loud and clear. And there are similar websites at almost every engineering school in the country, by the way. We want to promote innovation ecosystem. And so how do we do this effectively? It's an open question. When you think about what this means, innovation ecosystem, it's really a hive, right? It's a hive where the center point is the network that ties it all together. And all of the outlying components are lenses that focus light at this one center point. So the National Science Foundation defines innovation ecosystems as the people, institutions, policies, and resources that promote the translation of new ideas into products, processes, and devices. Promote the translation of new ideas. Let's unpack that. Let's unpack these. So people, institutions, policies, and resources. What we're really talking about here is intelligent humans in a structured environment that's supportive and nurturing, interacting with intelligent machines and systems, in which I include policies and resources. And as computational resources and machine intelligence becomes more and more critical to the future of health innovation and all of our activities, all startups, we're going to see more and more opportunities emerging from the symbiosis of intelligent humans and intelligent machines. But there has to be a structure, there has to be an environment in place to support that. The environment is what creates serendipity. Serendipity is the Brownian motion of people from different disciplines and different perspectives colliding and creating something that was never there before, creating something out of nothing, seemingly. And that's what we're striving for. So the case study is my field, actually, which may be surprising to some. Never thought you'd be hearing about neurosurgery on the stage today, but it really is, because neurosurgery actually is the oldest and the newest medical specialty simultaneously. Our specialty was only founded as an independent specialty in the 1930s by Dr. Cushing. But the oldest records of neurosurgery go back over 5,000 years. On the left here is a skull that had a survival brain surgery from the Neolithic era. Not one of my patients. This is prehistoric, to be clear. And on the right side, this is where we are today. This is artificial intelligence enhanced automated tractography, where we can see the white matter tracts of the brain and know where the fiber bundles are and avoid them during surgery, all enabled by very advanced computational abilities. We use this in the operating room today. And we see this progress. We see this kind of long, drawn-out curve of innovation, going from The Edwin Smith Papyrus, 1600 BC in ancient Egypt, where some sort of basic craniotomies for trauma were described. All the way to the 1970s, operating microscope coming on board. 1990s, computer-guided navigation. 1997, the same year as Clay Christensen's book, deep brain stimulation approved in the United States for Parkinson's disease. And now, in the 2010s, we have the advent of machine intelligence into the operating room, operating on the organ of human intelligence. It's a really beautiful loop. It's a beautiful loop. I believe, I'm biased, but I believe we're in the golden age of brain technology right now. We're entering it. And it may seem abstruse or obscure to some of you, but I guarantee that within the next 5 to 10 years, this will be affecting all of your lives on an everyday basis. You're all going to be citizen neuroscientists because we're going to have to engage with our human potential, with the brain in its health and disease state, and we're all going to have a better understanding of how our brains work and how effective they can be. So a whole series of public and private players, ranging from the National Institutes of Health to private companies like Google and Facebook, to foundations like the Allen Institute, Paul Allen, are now pumping billions of dollars collectively into neuroscience and applied neuroscience technology. This has been in the news recently. We've heard about brain-computer interfaces. Elon Musk is working on brain-computer interfaces. Facebook has a program for non-invasive brain-computer interfaces. We see neuroprosthetics coming on board. This is from Johns Hopkins, man controlling a robotic arm with his mind alone. The future is very, very exciting. This is a great time to be alive if you're a brain geek or a health geek in general. I mean, you look at that exponential increase over the past 30 years in research publications and patents related to neurotechnology, and you see there's an opportunity here. There are now publicly available data sets and software programs that anyone can download for free, like the Allen Brain Explorer, that can access gene expression information about the brain, anatomical information about the brain, and do research from your laptop that the world's greatest professors could not have done a decade or two ago. It's extraordinary. We have makers and hackers getting in on the movement. There's a whole movement of people building devices, often in their garages. This is an example of a brain-computer interface that is 3D printed by the OpenBCI project in New York. And there's a whole host of these groups around the world. It's very analogous to what was going on in the 1970s with the homebrew computer club and the personal computer revolution. Venture capitalists have caught on to this. This is Shaheen Farshi, partner at Lux Capital, writing last year, saying the hundreds of $millions of government funding that's gone into brain technology is now generating this thriving brain startup ecosystem. And that is what led to the creation of Neurolaunch, which is an accelerator that I co-founded with Mr. Chris Klaus, a very famous Georgia Tech alumnus and donor, and others here at Georgia Tech. And this is the world's first accelerator incubator program for neurotechnology companies. And we started out right here in Tech Square, investing and mentoring companies in this space, and have now become a global entity, a global think tank. And this is an example of creating an innovation ecosystem around a discipline and simultaneously around a community and a space. And that community is here. So it's typical accelerator. We give access to mentorship, funding, workspace, rapid validation of concepts to these companies, something that previously was not really found in the neuroscience space and very rarely in the health space. We've had some great outcomes from the program. Many of the companies that have gone through, at this point there are 12, have gone on to either exits or very successful venture rounds that are on the market with products. And so we're very excited to see this grow. We have a network of satellite locations and ambassadors worldwide, and we're continuing to expand on that work that started right here upstairs in Georgia Tech. I will leave you with a few comments today about reflections and principles for the next generation of health innovators. I work with a lot of young people, a lot of students. It's a very important part of my mission. I see some in the audience today. There's 3 things that I would advise you. Avoid complacency. Have a bias toward early adoption. Have the bias. Go ahead. It's okay. But do it responsibly. Collaborate outside your tribe and build an innovation practice. So avoid complacency. Push the envelope technologically. This is the first robotic-assisted craniotomy in the state of Georgia, 2016. This is at Grady Hospital. And it's an example of using advanced technology to do something that you could not do before. Nope, on the left side of that curve. This one switched. So don't be a laggard. Be an early adopter. Be an innovator. So you've seen this curve or some variant of it. There are people in the world who won't be. And healthcare is one of those fields where you will see a lot of them because there are many entrenched interests in healthcare. It's an industry that is heavily regulated with many entrenched interests. Nonetheless, we in this room must be the people who are early adopters and be prepared to collaborate with those who aren't. Be prepared to understand their way of thinking. Work with those outside your tribe. I think that humans are a very tribal species. Anthropologists have described this in all respects, including in the workplace. So we tend to, doctors like to talk to doctors, engineers like to talk to engineers, business people like to talk to business people. And what happens if we go too far down that path is that we lose the ability to see a problem with fresh eyes. We lose the ability to get an outsider's perspective. And I've been very fortunate in my time here in Atlanta to work with Georgia Tech students through the Capstone program and others here in this community to bring together Emory Healthcare and the medical institutions in town and the engineering institutions. I think this should be done in every city. Some of the most exciting and productive ideas come when an engineer is talking to someone who knows the clinical need and vice versa. Lastly, much like building a surgical practice, even if you're not a surgeon or a physician, you can have a practice too. You can have an innovation practice. And if you're working in healthcare, I would encourage you to see your work in that way. Have a practice. See your work with the same level of professionalism that a physician would in seeing patients. And what does that mean? What does that mean for a young person, say, coming out of Georgia Tech and wanting to be an engineer and develop medical devices? Well, observe those unmet clinical needs. Start with the needs first, and then go to the engineering solution. Don't start with the solution and start with a hammer, look for a nail. You don't want that. Become involved with health startups. Start one yourself, advise one, go hang out with startup companies. You'd be surprised how many physicians would benefit from doing this. And the same goes for engineers, and the same goes for business people, of course. Seek collaboration models with those who have different training than you. I can't emphasize that enough. It's been probably one of the most important things in my life, and that's been demonstrated again and again around the world in different innovation ecosystems. And work within your institution to improve not only technology, but processes. Healthcare is a system. And going back to that IOM report, the Institute of Medicine, to improve the quality of healthcare, we don't need technology alone. We need a systems approach, better processes. And technology can help us do that. And so, again, humans plus machines and systems generates the ecosystem. It's a function. It's a dependent function, right? There are a few millennials in the room, so for their benefit, intelligent minds plus intelligent machine minds equals a successful ecosystem. Thank you very much. In conclusion, this is just one last shot I like to include when I speak publicly. When you get to see this is the surface of the human cerebral cortex, normal cortex right there. It totally changes the way you approach the world. I mean, you cannot forget an image like that because you're looking at the organ that gives all of us meaning, the organ that gives all of us our inspiration, our creativity, and connects us, makes us all the same. Under the hood, we're all the same, no matter what your race, religion, socioeconomic status, political beliefs, nationality, we're all the same. And it's very inspiring to think about what we can do with that brain of ours. And Oliver Sacks, who's one of my favorite writers, neurologist by training, says something that's applicable, I think, to all of us. We see with the eyes, but we see with the brain as well. And seeing with the brain is often called imagination. Thanks.